Welcome to my fake podcast. My name is Hannah. This is my guest today, Isla Morley. She is the author of The Last Blue, coming out in May. Welcome to the show, Isla.
Good to be here.
Today, we're going to talk about one of those finicky, kind of pesky topics that I'm sure you and your other creative friends talk about, and it's when you're blocked, when you get stuck. This applies, I think this conversation can apply to so many kinds of creators, but since we're both writers, we'll mostly be talking about writing. Writer's block is a term we throw around a lot. What is writer's block to you?
Fear. Yeah, I think there are all kinds of different fears, but there's only one kind of creative block. And we should talk about those fears because they're different. And they, for me, they emerge at different times in the writing process. But really, it's a fear-based response to the page and to the story.
Yes.
Don't you think?
Yeah, but I'm glad you said that because this is definitely the thesis of, if you've read Big Magic, which I highly recommend, by Elizabeth Gilbert. But a lot of people think of writer's block as maybe some sort of other external force, maybe just keeping them from ideas, or I just can't, so I'm going to give up. But if we go to the root of it, it's fear, right? What's the fear of?
Well, for me, at the very beginning, I think
Wait, you get blocked? Oh. That's so encouraging to hear. It's not just me.
Every other day.
Oh, okay, good.
Yeah, it's the fear of this isn't going to be interesting. This is stupid. So it's kind of a shaming voice that's going on in my head all the time.
Yeah.
Right. Do you have that?
Yeah, it's a lot. Mine is like, you're trying too hard.
Yeah. So whatever you're going to write is going to expose you. And we've all had those shaming voices that happen in real life, and somehow they get into our heads and we don't even recognize them. And for me, I don't know, for you, there's no point in arguing. That's what I've learned. Like, if you just kind of engage in a debate with that kind of shaming voice, that's going to keep you from writing, and your block's going to get even bigger. So what if
but what would be an example of arguing with that voice? Like if your voice says, this is stupid, and you're like, no, it's not.
Well, you'd say, well, I'm going to write something clever. Just watch this paragraph. And, you write this, what you think is a super clever paragraph, and that's the worst thing to do.
Right. To try to be clever.
Yeah, and so it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. You actually did write something that is completely uninteresting because you were trying to prove a point with this voice in your head. So what if we just said, maybe it is going to be uninteresting and boring. It's certainly not worth reading right now, but that's not why I'm writing right now. That's, give me some time. The point is now to write something really rough, just to allow this idea to find expression in this space. And give me time, because later I'll make it nice and pretty. And
I'd like to stop there for a second. You said something really interesting, is just why you're writing. And I know you're talking mostly about the current draft you're at. Like, I'm here just exploring. I'm writing a rough, it might just be, 50 pages worth. I'm just trying to get the story down. But I think ultimately it's important to ask at every stage, why am I even writing this book, right? Because if it's to prove a point, and if it's to come off as clever and smart and cool and interesting, it probably won't be.
Well, don't you know people who say, oh, I want to be a writer. That's what I want to do.
Yeah.
For me, the story came first.
Yeah.
I had this character emerge that became really compelling.
For your first novel.
Yes. And being a writer just happened really as an accident. I was just kind of following the story to see what would happen, and that led to a book, and then it led to a profession. But with every story subsequently, it starts with this idea, and it's not about being a writer, it's about being a storyteller. And first to have the story be told to yourself. So discovering this unfolding story and being excited about it, and kind of being this creator or a co-creator with some kind of thing that's larger than yourself, some kind of idea out there, and to be a conduit and to see where that goes.
Well, I think that right there should free anyone who feels blocked, because if you're just, I mean, I come coming at it very differently from you. I've wanted to be a writer ever since I knew what one was. When I was a kid, I read Little Women, and for me, I thought Jo was the coolest person.
I loved that book so much,
good.
But I never want to tell people that was inspirational, because
for sure,
it's the Russian novels that are
supposed to Little Women, amazing. I would like imitate Jo and like eat an apple while reading a book, because that's what she did, and that's always what I wanted to be. And so that, it's hard because that drives me a lot. I want a career as a writer, but it can block you, because then there's the pressure. There's the pressure of, well, this isn't publishable. What you're writing right now will never be published.
You're not Jo. You'll never be Jo.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you can never be. And not to mention all those other inspirations of the countless authors that I love so much that I try to imitate, that I can't because I'm not them. But it's learning how to release that.
Well, and I think that touches on the fear that this has got to amount to something. You've got to have a product to show for yourself, to establish yourself as being a writer.
Yeah.
And I think that fear, again, that's just another way to kind of stop you from doing something. So if at the onset you have to prove your status by producing something, you're going to have those voices that say, well, you don't have any guarantee that you're going to have a product here. Yeah. So don't even start.
Especially in this day and age when productivity is everyone's goal, everyone's, like resolution of the 2020. It's to be more productive. There's so many videos online about how to be more productive. And this is my biggest issue that I take with writing advice. A lot of it is just centered around word count. And if you're not hitting at least 700 words a day, then you're not actually writing and you're not being a productive drafter. And I understand this for some genres. It does make sense where it's like, you got to keep moving, like essentially like get the words down for sure. But it's just so much pressure to produce when maybe at the stage where I'm writing, I don't have anything to produce. It's still a fossil. I have to dig it out.
That's right. I love that analogy.
Yeah.
Well, and 2 days ago, I went into my office to write, and it was the first time in ages, and I'm exploring a new story. And after 2 hours, I came out with the name of a secondary character. That's all I had
to show. Just a secondary character. Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah. I'm proud.
Yeah. And to your point, I mean, it's just like, you can't look at the end of the day and see how much closer am I to not just finishing the book, but publishing the book, because that's
what if we said,
goal.
Let's analyze this. Let's take stock in 12 months. Like instead of every single day kind of checking your temperature, where are we in 12 months? Well, has the story developed? Has it taken us anywhere? Is it taking shape? How has it changed? Oh, we abandoned that story, we're on to a different story.
Yeah, no, I really like that because it's a sort of deadline, and it's sort of like, well, you have 12 months to at least get something, at least discover something about your story, to see if you are actually as in love with it as you were when you first started. And that motivates me just to get my butt in the chair every day, because if you're just assessing once a day, every day is different and life happens. And this whole bullshit about having to write every single day, you don't have to write every day.
No, you don't.
You really don't. You can write once a week if you want, if that's all your schedule allows.
And sometimes we've talked about how things have happened in my life where it just, everything was on pause for a couple of months.
Yeah.
But I want to talk about the other fear.
Okay.
This is my fear.
Okay.
And that is that the well is going to run dry.
Right.
That I think I get excited about a story or a particular character or a scene that I wrote yesterday, and that felt so good, and I was in such a good mood about it. But now there's a long walk down the hallway in the morning, and I've got to go to that desk, and what if that excitement is not going to be there? Right. Or worse, like what if the whole idea has just evaporated?
Right.
And so I recognize in myself, although I'm very much a subscriber, like sign me up to the whole mentality of the abundance mentality. There's so many ways where I keep getting into that kind of scarcity mentality, and that is that the well is going to run dry and my idea is not going to be there. And I just have to remind myself, I've been writing for 12 years, and the ideas keep coming.
Yeah. You know what? I heard a really good analogy. I don't remember the author who said this, but she was very prolific, and someone said, how do you create so many stories? How do you not run out of stories? And she says, there's only so many keys on a piano. You're not going to ask a musician, are you going to run out of melodies?
I love that.
Yeah.
So true.
But I think with any of these fears that we're talking about, but especially this one that you're going to run up dry, fear builds on fear, panic builds on panic, as we're seeing right now, March 2020, if that's when you're watching this, and anxiety builds on anxiety, and it's just you might run up dry if you like fear it so much, right?
Well, I've had a very well developed fear, and the ideas mercifully still keep coming.
But how do you remedy that? How do you, like, if you're walking down the hallway, your palms are getting sweaty, you have to open the door to your office and sit down. You have the pencil in your hands now. Now I have to do something. Like how
it comes.
It just comes.
As your hand starts moving, you start to close the gap between the shaming voice in your head and the pen. And if you can kind of stunt that process, you can just allow the ideas to start coming. So it's just like, I don't know, when you get on the treadmill, you know, and you're first stiff and kind of creaky, and then you find your stride and you're running,
Absolutely.
and
then
it just happens.
I met a new writer friend who told me that sometimes if she's not feeling it right away to write prose, she writes a poem as a little warm up. Also, I really love this piece of advice for someone who feels blocked, is to pretend you are you have a documentary crew in your house and they just need to get some B-roll of you writing a novel. Because then you're just sitting there, like, pretend to write, and then you will start writing. Yeah.
I think another fear that keeps us blocked is the fear of being vulnerable.
Yeah.
So in order to write authentically about any character or situation, we have to access those places in ourselves where our true and perhaps even hidden emotions reside. And sometimes that means going to a place that's painful, that we don't necessarily want to revisit. And then especially if we translate that kind of vulnerability onto the page and thinking, oh, other people might read this, and what if they criticize it? So they're criticizing me.
They know
in my
me.
hurt. Yeah.
But then you can't even think about publishing. Like, if you're writing your soul out and some of your deepest, darkest shameful moments, you cannot think about publishing it in those moments, right?
No, I don't. I think it's counterproductive to think about publishing at any stage of the game, except when you're working with your agent or your editor and you're starting to revise. I mean, but for maybe 4/5 of the creative process, you can't think about that.
But how do I stop those voices in my head?
Well, just recognizing them, and then repopulating your headspace with other voices.
Right.
I don't think that you can ever just displace them entirely. And again, if we acknowledge them and say, that's a helpful voice that I'll come and talk to you when it's time to revise a certain chapter. That might be more of a cooperative environment.
Right. When you're working with people who are reading your book and things like that. What do you say to someone who believes that a true writer words just flow? Those who have to kind of grit through and white knuckle through portions of their writing aren't real writers. I've heard this said, that if you're not writing effortlessly, you're not a real writer.
Oh, well, Does that person have a publisher?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
I don't think so.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
No, I think I've heard just the opposite from the experiences of storytellers. You know, that there is a lot of white knuckling, and there's a lot of, the crafting of something that takes time, and it takes a lot of effort, and you have to risk a lot of things. Yeah. But I would just say that we first have to think of ourselves as storytellers.
Yeah.
And writers kind of has this big, heavy label, and there's all these expectations and comparisons to be made. But if we think about going, you know, to the way back when we sat around fires, we told ourselves stories. And I think that there's a natural ability in all of us to do that. Yeah. And we kind of recognize the elements of a good story, what kind of keeps our audience engaged, what keeps ourselves animated in the process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So writing isn't effortless for you 100% of the time?
Like 99% of the time, it's never.
Right. And that's kind of what I want to emphasize, is that there are moments when writing comes and I feel really overtaken by a character or a line or an idea or an image, and then I'm flowing for 3 hours. That totally happens, and it is the most orgasmic, wonderful, magical experience that I'm never going to deny. But most of the time, it's a struggle, right?
Well, and I enjoy the struggle. I enjoy the revising process.
That's good.
It's like a crossword. When you think you've solved one corner of the crossword, as you work your way to another part of the real estate, you realize, oh, something's wrong up there. And so trying to reconfigure and having to go back and fix something else and make it stronger, where some other new idea starts to emerge that you hadn't thought of. Like all of that, to me, it is hard, but it is so engaging and so meaningful.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Who wouldn't want to be a writer?
That's kind of how I feel too. Like I just assume everyone else wants to be a writer too. And then when I realize they don't, I'm like, weird.
Yeah, but everybody loves to listen to a good story, yes, or they want to tell a good story.
Yes. The reason we are talking with Isla today, this is part of a mini series that doesn't have a name, but Isla wrote a book called The Last Blue. I'm going to give her a couple minutes to just explain what The Last Blue is about. It comes out in May.
It's about a young woman who has blue skin. She lives in 1937, and she's had to hide herself her whole life because of her blue skin. And she's lived an isolated life deep in the Appalachian wilderness, and everything about her is about to change when a photographer from Cincinnati happens into the area, hears a strange story, and comes looking for a scoop to save his career.
It's a love story. It's historical fiction. It's unlike anything I've ever read, and I read it very quickly because it is that exciting and beautiful, and a lot of like, what? I have to read the next chapter type of read.
Did you read where the crawdads
I haven't.
Sing? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like that.
Oh yeah. So this is sort of like a comp title
there
for
you. Go.
The title you would compare it to. So pick it up if you'd like to support Isla. You can pre-order the book by clicking the link below. And that is all. Yeah. And the sun is coming out, so that's good.